real quick, if you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Campfire Cult Pod for free. It'll really help us reach listeners just like you. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. And finally, if you don't mind, please share, rate, and review wherever possible. Welcome, dear listener, to the Campfire Cult Podcast. From a camper van deep in the haunted woods, I bring you first-hand accounts of chilling encounters with the paranormal. Step into the night and take a peek into the realm where reality and the supernatural collide. My name is Jazz, and I'll be your host. Welcome back, campers. Tonight's episode is not for the faint of heart. From a special forces team brought to a standstill by impossible tracks in the Alaskan snow, to a glowing-eyed giant stalking a meditation circle in the Spanish countryside, we'll find out not everything that visits in the night comes to harm. Some just watch, some protect, and some are still waiting in the woods for us to come upon them. So stoke the fire, keep your eyes on the tree line, and listen closely, because the things in tonight's stories, they might still be watching. Let's begin. First up, a special forces team on a remote Alaska mission comes across something that terrifies even the toughest among them.
In March of 1988, I was the team commander, captain in rank, of a special forces A-team conducting a strategic reconnaissance training mission in Alaska. There were 11 soldiers on the team, all with a lot of special forces experience. We were wearing rucksacks and moving through deep snow in a wooded area using cross-country skis. As we approached a section where the woods became too dense for skis, I decided to go ahead on snowshoes with 2 other soldiers to scout the way forward. About 200 meters into the thicker woods, we came across a set of tracks that immediately caught our attention. The tracks were clearly from a 2-legged creature, moving perpendicular to our path. Human tracks of any kind are extremely rare in that part of Alaska, but these were especially unusual. The stride length was incredible, and there was no crushed snow on either the entry or exit sides of the holes left behind. We stopped to investigate. When we took off our snowshoes, we immediately sank about 2 feet into the snow, above our knees. Trying to walk in it, we left obvious signs: crushed snow at the entry point of the step, crushed snow again as we pulled our foot out, and even drag marks between steps. No matter how carefully we tried to move, we couldn't avoid disturbing the snow. The best any of us could manage was a stride of about 1.5 feet, but the tracks in front of us had strides over 5 feet long. Even more baffling, there were no signs of disturbed snow on entry or exit. After discussing the rational possibilities, I sent one of my men back to bring up the rest of the team. Among the 11 of us, we had more than 150 years of combined special forces experience in terrains all over the world. We also had extensive experience tracking both humans and animals. Everyone studied the tracks closely, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Only one explanation seemed to fit the evidence, but it wasn't a reasonable one. Based on the depth and stride length, we made an educated guess at the size of the creature. The group consensus: a 2-legged being approximately 9 feet tall, weighing somewhere between 500 to 600 pounds. That was the most rational conclusion we could come to. At that point, I made the call to set the training mission aside temporarily and follow the tracks. We strapped on our snowshoes and began tracking it through the woods. About an hour later, we heard it. From somewhere far ahead, we heard the most horrific sound any of us had ever heard. Everything in the forest fell instantly silent, We could hear our own hearts beating. The only other time we'd experienced that level of silence in nature was just before initiating an ambush, when even the insects and birds go quiet in anticipation of death. The sound itself was somewhere between a howl and a roar. My team sergeant, the most senior and experienced soldier with us, stopped me. He said, "Sir, speaking for both myself and the rest of the team, we really do not want to know what's at the end of those tracks." This stunned me. These men had spent their careers in the Special Forces. Nothing on 2 or 4 legs had ever rattled them. But this did. I understood his concern and I agreed. We turned back and resumed the original mission. There was also a silent mutual agreement among us not to speak of the incident after we returned. Keep in mind, this was a training mission, and we had no live ammunition. A confrontation with whatever made those tracks would have put us in serious danger. Our curiosity was real, but it was overpowered by the chilling certainty that we were no match for what lay ahead. And deeper still, we didn't want to know what it was. Tracks in the snow are easier to forget than seeing what made them. We were afraid. The tracks had stuck to the military crests of ridgelines and low terrain, minimizing exposure. When they crossed a ridgeline, they did so in a saddle, hidden from view. That told us something. Whatever made those tracks was big, far too large to be human, but it moved like a seasoned operator. It avoided open ground long before those clearings were even visible. It knew the land. It moved like someone conducting escape and evasion, exactly how we would move if we were trying to stay unseen. It made a concentrated effort to stay out of sight. I still believe the sound we heard was a warning, a deliberate message to back off. I've thought back on that day hundreds of times. I've wondered what might have happened if we kept following those tracks. There are arguments for and against that choice, but as for me, there are just some things you don't want to meet. Since then, I've had a very healthy respect for Sasquatch.
Next, a meditation under the stars turns into a terrifying encounter with a glowing sphere and a towering inhuman figure in rural Spain.
On the night of August 21st, 2014, in Talavera de la Reina, Toledo, Spain, 2 friends and I headed out to a field near a local extension bridge to do some meditation exercises. We had been sitting in silence for a while when I noticed a luminous sphere descending toward us. It was massive, maybe a third the size of the moon, and it hovered directly above where we sat. At first, I tried to ignore it, to stay focused on the meditation, but then I was hit by this sudden jolt, like a powerful electric current had surged through me. About a minute later, the large sphere vanished. But just before it disappeared, a smaller sphere detached from it and floated away. Curious, we decided to walk along a low wall, about 2.5 meters high, that stretched out across the field. It connected 2 posts and ran for almost a kilometer. As we moved along, we started to notice the air change. There was this thick, sulfuric smell, and the temperature felt like it had suddenly risen. I told my friends I was going to jog ahead to check the end of the wall and started running. Then I heard them shouting, "Stop! Stop! Come back!" I turned around and ran back toward them, confused and a little concerned. When I reached them, maybe 100 meters back, they looked shaken. They told me that while I had been running, they saw something huge, at least 3 or 4 meters tall, gliding across the ground on the other side of the wall, heading straight toward me. Just as they began to scream, they said the figure ducked behind a tree that was only about 5 meters away from where I had stopped. I immediately turned and looked, and that's when I saw it for myself. There, standing behind the tree, was a massive figure, easily 3 or 4 meters tall. Its eyes glowed a golden yellow color, almost pulsing. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, and the only thought in my mind was, "It's going to grab me." I screamed for my friends to run, and all 3 of us bolted. We didn't look back at first, but when we did, the thing was still there, now gliding on top of the wall as if it were following us. We ran until the road ended, and then we tore through a wooded area near the bridge. When we finally made it to the main road, the figure was gone. The next day, I went back. The tree it had stood behind was about 8 meters tall, That's when I realized the thing I saw was almost as tall as that tree. It had to have been even bigger than we'd thought, much taller than 4 meters. I found an area of flattened, scorched grass near the tree. The sulfur smell was gone, but the scene was eerily quiet. My friends told me that as they ran the night before, their legs had gone numb, like they were being pricked by needles, and it slowed them down. I hadn't felt that myself, but one thing we all remembered clearly, as we entered the field, it was like we'd run into something, a web. This thick, sticky, invisible substance clung to our faces, making it hard to see. We clawed it off as best we could while running and didn't stop until we were far from that place. I've been back to that field many times since. The trees are dry, vegetation is sparse, and I've never once seen any sign of spiders or webs in the area. Whatever we experienced that night, it wasn't natural, and I don't think it was meant to be seen.
Next, deep in the New Mexico mountains, a late-night camping trip turns to terror as 2 teens have an encounter with something huge. I'm from Roswell, New Mexico, born and raised. So yeah, I've had alien nonsense shoved in my face my entire life. I've always brushed it off. I'm a logical thinker. Weird things have happened to me before, but I've always been able to explain them away. That's just how my brain works. But what I'm about to share, I can't explain it. I don't even like thinking about it. I was 17 at the time, camping with my cousin Cam. He was also 17, his little brother Nick, who was 13, and their parents, my aunt and uncle. We were up in Lincoln National Forest near Cloudcroft, New Mexico. My uncle had just bought a new camper, so we figured we'd break it in for the weekend. The weather was perfect. Instead of sleeping in the camper, Cam, Nick, and I set up a tent about 60 yards away, just outside the tree line. We wanted our own space, our own little patch of forest. This wasn't an official campground. It was a quiet spot my uncle had known for years. No neighbors, no roads, no other campers, just forest. That night, after a long day of hiking, we were winding down. By 3 a.m., the fire had died, Nick was passed out, and Cam and I were still up in the tent, laying back, talking about girls from school and dumb ideas for inventions, the kind of stuff you ramble about when you're half asleep under the stars. And then we heard it. A scream tore through the trees from deep in the woods behind us, opposite the direction of the camper. It was blood-curdling, primal. Cam and I both shot up and said almost in unison, "What was that?" It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a fox. It was something big. The only way I can describe the sound is like a banshee, high-pitched, loud, and unnatural. Then it screamed again. Same sound, same direction. And that's when we heard the clicking. Low, guttural clicking noises, loud enough to carry through the forest. Nothing I'd ever heard before. Then another scream. More clicks, and it was getting closer. Maybe 10 yards closer. I looked at Cam, and his face mirrored what I felt. Absolute fear. I was trying to convince myself it was a bird, or maybe a mountain lion, something rational. But then we heard footsteps. Not the padding of an animal footsteps. Heavy ones. You could hear the crunch of branches underfoot. Whatever it was walking on 2 legs. Another screech echoed through the woods, followed by more clicking, and then something new. A second scream. Same tone, but different. More aggressive, more dominant. They were communicating. Cam and I just froze. I had an axe, but it was leaning against a log by the fire pit. Nick was still asleep, and we couldn't get him up. Both creatures started moving again, closer now. Still walking on 2 feet. No more screaming or clicking. Just the sound of them weaving through the brush, slowly, like they were stalking us. Then one of them screamed again, this time much closer, maybe 15 yards from the tent. Then the click started again and the other one answered. They were getting close, too close. I could hear each step now. I could feel the weight of them in the ground. Cam was shaking Nick, trying to wake him. I was panicking, trying to find the axe. Still at the fire. We were helpless. One of them stopped about 10 feet from the tent. The other kept coming. I could hear it circling. Then it walked right up to the tent. I don't know what came over me, but I screamed, "Get the fuck away from here! Leave us alone!" And it stopped. Just stood there, silent. I could see its silhouette through the fabric. It was tall, thin, but heavy, solid, humanoid. Its presence felt wrong, not like an animal, not even like a person. It felt dark, evil, like it wasn't just passing through. It came for something, and that something was us. The The moon had slipped behind the clouds, and it was pitch black. I couldn't hear breathing, couldn't hear anything. Then behind the tent, the other one clicked again, still 10 feet out. The one at the tent didn't respond, didn't move. I was paralyzed. My heart was pounding so loud I thought I might pass out. Then it happened. The one at the tent took 2 huge steps backward. Then the second one let out a scream so loud I thought my ears would burst. It shook the whole damn forest. I broke down, just cried, couldn't stop it. And then they ran. Thunderous bipedal footsteps crashing into the woods, one after the other, gone. We waited, listened. Nothing but fading footsteps. Then we unzipped the tent, grabbed Nick, who was still dazed and half asleep, and ran full speed to the camper. Woke my aunt and uncle up, trying to explain what just happened. They didn't believe us, thought we were just messing around, told us to go to bed. We slept in the camper the rest of the trip, and I didn't step foot outside the site again. To this day, I don't know what those things were, but they weren't animals, and they sure as hell weren't human. They walked upright, they clicked, they communicated, they were hunting, and they've haunted me ever since. Coming up, a late-night drive in rural Louisiana turns terrifying when a father and son come face to face with something straight out of folklore.
I saw it in the spring of 2016 in southeast Louisiana near Franklinton. My son, 12 years old at the time, and I were driving along some back highways around 10 p.m. As we came around a curve to the right, another car approached from the opposite direction. I dimmed my headlights. That's when I saw it. This thing was about 8 feet tall, standing on the right side of the road. It was staring at the oncoming car, and as it passed, it turned to look in our direction. Then, it crouched down into a sprinter's starting stance. Its fur was a dirty white, covering most of its body. The upper torso looked human-like, but I couldn't get a good look at the lower half. Its head was large and wolf-like, with a thick mane of that same dirty white fur running down its back. The entire encounter lasted maybe 10 seconds. I mostly focused on the top half. It had a narrow waist with well-defined human-like muscles. Its ears were pulled back, like a cat preparing to pounce. Its eyes glowed bright yellow. The mouth was wide open, filled with sharp teeth and long canines. My son swears it had inverted knees like a dog. I've come to refer to it as a were-dog. Its fur and overall appearance match the old tales of the rougarou, stories my grandfather used to tell me. But what's unsettling is this: we saw it less than 10 miles from our home, and a few years before our encounter, there was a similar sighting of an upright creature just 3 miles from where we were that night.
Whoa, that's not just a creepy roadside encounter. That's a collision between folklore and modern cryptid reports. Everything you described. The towering height, the wolf-like head, the glowing yellow eyes, the crouched stance, lines up eerily well with the old Cajun tales of the rougarou. Dirty white fur, a thick mane, and a presence that feels more curse than creature. That's the stuff passed down through generations in Louisiana. But here's the thing. Those same traits also match countless Dogman sightings across North America. The muscular, human-like upper body, the canine legs, the predator-like posture. This wasn't just a figure from folklore. It's part of a much bigger pattern, a crossroad between myth and modern mystery. And the fact that your son noticed the inverted knees, that's a detail reported in some of the most credible Dogman encounters out there. So, was it the rougarou? Was it Dogman? Or are they one and the same? Either way, you and your son didn't just have a strange sighting. You came face to face with something that walks the line between legend and nightmare. Real quick, when I'm away from the campfire and not producing this show, I'm a brand designer and coffee roaster. This year I launched my own coffee brand called Outlands Coffee. If you love damn good coffee and want to support a fiercely independent small business while also supporting this podcast, head over to outlandscoffee.com and give us a shot. I roast to order, single origin perfection alongside a couple of bold, adventurous blends, crafted for those who take their coffee as seriously as their campfire stories. Here in Washington, we don't just believe in Bigfoot, we believe in great coffee too. Try it for yourself. Use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order. Now, back to the show. Coming up, 2 kids peer out from a porch and see a wolf man pacing the yard.
When I was a little girl, my papa lived in an old farmhouse in the upper end of Cleveland County, North Carolina. We used to visit him every Saturday. My dad, my mom, my baby brother, and I, along with several of my dad's brothers, his sister, and their assorted children, would all gather at Papa's after lunch. Our cousins would play outside and in the woods behind Papa's farm, which stretched for probably 10 miles to a dirt road, beyond which lay an apple orchard and a cattle pasture. This was the early 80s in rural North Carolina, back when kids could vanish into the woods for hours and no one worried. We'd all have dinner together, hang out until bedtime for us kids, and then head home. At the time, I had just turned 8. My cousin Jay was 6. My brother and Jay's sister were both toddlers, barely walking. That night, Jay and I, along with our little siblings, were the only kids at Papa's. He and I had spent the day playing in the woods as usual, and out in the yard where Jay was trying out his prized brand new skateboard. After supper, we hung out in the back bedroom watching TV until our parents said it was time to go home. Papa's house had a glassed-in porch that doubled as a laundry room, right outside the kitchen. Because of the way the lot sloped and the house was built, this porch was elevated, offering a panoramic view of the backyard. I'd guess the porch windows were about 20 feet off the ground, with the backyard sloping gently away from the house. The yard was lit by 2 large lights, one mounted on a pole to the left, the other on the side of Papa's shop to the right. They were bright and lit up large areas, but a shadow lingered under a big tree between the shop and the greenhouse on the far left. That's where Jay had left his skateboard before dinner. He and I decided we should go out and grab it while the adults were still saying their goodbyes in the kitchen. The wolf man was in the backyard. We saw him at the same time, right as we stepped onto the porch. He was man-sized and looked exactly like a werewolf from a bad B movie. He had a shaggy, dark brown wolfman head with long pointed ears and a lighter brown muzzle. His hands looked mostly human, though covered in dark fur and tipped with long claws. He wore a red and black checkered flannel shirt and blue jeans. I don't remember anything about his feet, whether he had claws or shoes, but his legs were straight like a human's, not bent like a dog's. He moved back and forth across the yard in a strange, jerky, almost robotic way. His legs barely moved, as if he were gliding more than walking. It was unnatural, like watching something on a track. His body was human in proportion. He would move from the edge of the light near the greenhouse across to the shop light, then stop, turn sharply, and glide back. His eyes glowed red, like those laser pointers used to tease cats, bright and piercing. The only time he disappeared from view was when he passed into the shadow beneath the tree. It felt like he wanted us to see him, like he was performing. The feeling he gave off was one of deep, overwhelming malevolence. I felt like he knew we were watching. He could sense our fear, and he was enjoying it. That might sound strange, but that's how it felt. Pure dread, like he was doing it all on purpose. We screamed for our parents. When they came rushing onto the porch and saw us hysterical, yelling that there was a wolf man in the yard, they did the usual. Talked about overactive imaginations and too much Scooby-Doo. Even though the creature was right there, walking back and forth in the yard, none of the adults could see him. I remember pointing and saying, "It's out there." I was so frustrated that they couldn't see what we were seeing. Finally, my dad, trying to put an end to it, said he'd go out and get Jay's skateboard from under the tree. We begged him not to, but he went anyway. At that moment, the wolfman was still gliding back and forth. As Dad opened the porch door and stepped outside, he triggered a motion sensor light on the corner of the porch. Just before the light came on, the wolfman had entered the shadow beneath the tree. When the light lit up that area, he was gone. Vanished. It was like he had disappeared into thin air. We never saw him again. Though we did become mildly obsessed with werewolves for a while, even hoarding silver in case we ever needed to make silver bullets. When you're a kid, it's amazing what can become normal. We were scared when it happened, but afterward it felt unreal, bizarre, like a game. A few odd things happened in the woods after that, but nothing clearly paranormal. Nothing like the night we saw the wolfman. Years went by, but I always wondered about what we saw that night. My cousin Jay forgot it completely. I asked him about it a few months ago, and he didn't remember it at all. What brought it back for me was a story in Linda Godfrey's Real Wolfmen, about a girl who saw a hitchhiking werewolf wearing clothes. Until then, I'd never seen a serious report of a canine humanoid wearing clothes in any book or article. I don't often tell anyone this story because, yeah, it sounds completely insane. Of course, my parents and Jay's parents never believed we saw anything that night. Not for 1 second.
Stories like this always get my gears turning. I mean, a wolf man wearing clothes? That detail alone makes me wonder, are we really seeing creatures from folklore, or is something more complex at play here? Maybe these things aren't monsters in the traditional sense. Maybe they're manifesting in ways our minds can process, like borrowing shapes from pop culture and from the movies we grew up with. And for those of us who grew up in the 80s, there's a very specific image of a wolf man burned into our memories. For me, that came straight from the movie Monster Squad. If you haven't seen it, it's basically the Goonies meets Universal Monsters. Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and, of course, the Wolfman. And the way this witness described the creature, it sounds eerily similar. So what are we really dealing with here? Shape-shifting entities? Tulpas born from our collective memory? Or is it something physical that's hiding behind a mask of nostalgia? Let me know what you think. Are we being haunted by real monsters or by our own imaginations? Next. While on a silent retreat in Big Sur, one man encounters a towering, inhuman figure, fast, fluid, and unlike anything earthly. I was on a silent retreat at the new Camaldoli Hermitage, a working monastery just south of Big Sur, California, and had gone outside late one night. That's when I saw it. A very tall humanoid figure, easily 7 to 8 feet tall. It had long, thin limbs and appeared to be wearing some kind of shiny, form-fitting bodysuit. It was running across a hill, moving with an unnatural fluidity and incredible speed. I immediately turned and sprinted the 20 feet back to my room, which had a back door and a window overlooking a narrow gulch, barely wide enough for a deer path. Just as I got inside, I caught a glimpse of the same figure passing through the view of the far window. It was like a rack focus in a movie, my eyes shifting from one part of the room to another as I rushed to lock the door. And then it was gone. I never saw it again. But the distance it would have had to cover to reach the back of the building in that short time was impossible for any human. I consider myself a rational person. The whole point of the retreat was to disconnect from the tech world I live in, so I've always tried to explain it away as some kind of military experiment. Now, for those listening who aren't familiar, the new Camaldoli Hermitage sits deep in Big Sur, right in the heart of where people for centuries have reported sightings of the so-called Dark Watchers. These are towering, shadowy figures, often seen standing silently on ridgelines, watching travelers from afar before vanishing into thin air. And what you described, tall, fast-moving, eerily smooth, dressed in something shiny, it doesn't perfectly match the classic Watcher silhouette. But who's to say what these entities really are? Maybe this was a modern face of the same ancient presence, changed, evolved, or showing itself differently to different people. Or maybe you caught a glimpse of what the Dark Watchers don't want us to see. Either way, I'd be terrified. Next up is another odd creature encounter. A child wakes up in a dark North Carolina home and sees something in the sewing room that defies logic, memory, and maybe even reality.
I was about 6 years old when this happened, back in 1998. At the time, I lived with my parents and grandparents in a fairly large house in North Carolina, not far from Brown Mountain. If you've ever heard of the Brown Mountain Lights, well, it's the kind of place where weird things seem to happen. One night, I woke up really early, still pitch dark outside. We didn't have any streetlights, so when I say it was dark, I mean it was dark. I needed to use the bathroom, so I got out of bed and made my way down the hall. My room was at one end of the top floor, and the bathroom was all the way at the other end. The only other room up there was my grandma's sewing room. She was very particular about keeping that door shut when she wasn't using it, like obsessively so. And everyone else in the house, my parents, grandparents, they all slept downstairs. So I should have been alone up there. But as I walked toward the bathroom, I noticed something strange. The sewing room door was wide open. That immediately gave me pause. I crept a little closer and looked inside. There was a soft bluish light coming from the window across the room, and in front of that window was a figure, a silhouette. It stood maybe 5 feet tall, and its head, God, I'll never forget it, its head looked like a hammerhead shark. flat and stretched wide, kind of like a Y shape, but bent at the ends. It didn't look human. I just stared at it, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Then it started rocking, slowly, side to side. That broke me. I turned and ran back to my room, dove under the covers, and just laid there, shaking. That's when things got even weirder. Suddenly, it felt like I was nowhere. Not asleep, not awake. I was in this black void. But it wasn't just empty darkness, it felt like I didn't exist anymore. Like I had no place in time or space. It's hard to explain, but that's the only way I can describe it. Then, in 2003, something else happened. My friend Daniel and I were walking home late one night. Out of nowhere, this glowing blue light appeared about 50 feet above us. It hovered, then darted off in a zigzag pattern and vanished over a neighbor's house. It was gone in a flash. And I can't help but wonder, was that light somehow connected to the thing I saw in the sewing room?
Next, a devoted father keeps waking to strange events when his sick son sleeps beside him.
I'm a single dad. My son was born in 2010. I like to think of myself as a very dedicated father. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because of that, when he's involved, my memories tend to be clearer and more vivid. It's like my mind knows to hold on to those moments. Since the first time he ever slept in bed with me, I've noticed strange things happening at night. And I mean every single time. Sometimes I hear noises or see blurry shapes as I wake up. Other times, a door or window that I know was shut will be open, or a nightlight will be unplugged and on the floor. Last night he was sick, so I let him sleep in my bed. I've recently started working overnight shifts, so I'm a very light sleeper now during regular sleep hours. The last thing I remember before drifting off was that he had kicked off his blankets, something he always does, and his head had slipped off the pillow. His pillow was pushed up toward the headboard. Around 4 a.m. I woke up to a sound. This time I actually saw something. My bedroom door was open. I never leave it open. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Along the door frame, I could see 4 very long fingers. Not claws, but fingers. When I moved to get out of bed, the hand pulled away. I caught a glimpse of what looked like a tail fleeing down the hall. I jumped up and looked around the next room. Nothing. I searched the entire house. Nothing. Every door and window was still locked. When I went back to check on my son, everything had changed. His pillow was perfectly under his head. The blankets were pulled up over him, and his fever had broken. He was sleeping peacefully, calm, safe. What's strange is that I didn't feel threatened. Not last night, and not any of the other nights this kind of thing has happened. In fact, I felt more at ease than I probably should have, given the situation. That feeling has always stood out to me. I've always had dogs that sleep in my room with me, and they didn't bark or growl at anything. I also have a history of sleep paralysis, but I always know when I've had an episode. They're absolutely terrifying, and this didn't feel like that at all. And just to be clear, I don't drink. If I ever do anything at all, it's maybe smoke a little weed when I go camping with old high school friends. So, here's my question. Should I be worried? Are there sweet cryptids that watch over kids? Does this sound like something any of you have ever heard about? Or could this just be some weird part of my subconscious? Any insight would be really appreciated.
You hear a lot of stories on this show. Shadow figures, cryptid sightings, things breaking into people's space with force or malice. But this feels different, almost like a guardian. The way the child's fever broke, the blankets tucked in, the pillow repositioned. It's hard to chalk that up to coincidence. And the dad felt calm even after seeing something with a hand and a tail flee his room. That kind of peace doesn't usually follow a paranormal encounter. It makes you wonder, are there entities out there that aren't here to scare us, but to help? Maybe not all cryptids or visitors are monsters lurking in the dark. Maybe some are protectors watching quietly from the edge of the room. Let me know what you think. Guardian spirit, gentle cryptid, or something else entirely. For our final story of the evening, on a quiet country road in Arkansas, a couple comes face to face with something straight out of legend.
My brother and his wife had a shocking event on May 5th, 2011, as they were driving home to Genoa, Arkansas, after visiting his in-laws in Texarkana. He was driving eastbound on Tennessee Road, County Road 16, at around 7:30 p.m. and had just passed Mosley Road when a creature suddenly jumped out of the trees and brush. It crossed the road in front of them and disappeared into the thick woods, heading in the direction of Old Biddy Lake. They both got a good look at it and described it as being about 6 feet tall and very stout, with massive legs and feet. It was covered in long reddish-brown hair that was matted with dirt and debris. When they stopped the car to look toward where it had gone, they were immediately hit by a horrific stench. The windows were down, so the smell was overpowering. I've heard the stories of the Fouke monster ever since I was a young girl, but I never bought into the hype. We actually lived near Mercer Bayou for a while and spoke with several people who claimed to have seen it or knew someone who had. My brother refuses to identify himself publicly, fearing it might cause problems, but he felt compelled to warn others. I believe him. He's never lied to me and is one of the most trustworthy, hardworking people I know. He's also a seasoned outdoorsman who knows the swamps and backwoods of southwest Arkansas like the back of his hand. But this encounter left him shaken, so much so that he was at a loss for words when he told me about it. And that is very unlike him.
I always say the best stories come from people who don't want attention. That kind of detail, the smell, the size, the way it moved, lines up almost perfectly with what folks have been describing for decades in that part of Arkansas.
Arkansas loves its Razorbacks, but in Miller County, it's a different beast they talk about. Channel 7's Andrew Mobley took a trip down to Fouke to speak with some locals and some monster hunters.
For decades, locals in the small town of Fouke have said that something inhuman stalks the deep, dark swamps in their region. The Fouke monster. Reba Killian was a little girl when she says she first saw the creature on a late-night drive.
7.5 to 8 feet tall. And we just started screaming. We were banging on the truck trying to get our parents to stop because we were kids. Nobody was going to believe us. And we used to run those woods all the time in between my house and her house.
Now, if you're not familiar, the Fouke monster is kind of a southern cousin to Bigfoot. It's been haunting the swamps and back roads of Miller County, Arkansas since at least the 1940s. But it really made headlines in the early 1970s when a local family reported being attacked by a large, hairy creature outside their home. That story inspired the cult classic docudrama The Legend of Boggy Creek in 1972, which cemented the creature's place in cryptid lore. Descriptions are always pretty consistent. Around 7 feet tall, covered in long dark hair, sometimes reddish, walking upright, and smelling absolutely awful. People say it lives in the thick swamps near places like Mercer Bayou and Boggy Creek, and only rarely comes out into the open. If the Fouke monster is real, and I'm not saying it isn't, this is exactly the kind of encounter that keeps the legend alive. What do you think? Did they see the real deal, or is there something even stranger roaming the back roads of Arkansas? That's all for tonight, dear listeners. Unless you are a Patreon cult member, where I have about 20 more minutes of real stories that'll make you hesitate the next time you want to venture into the woods alone. And please remember, if you want to support this podcast and love a damn good cup of coffee, head on over to outlandscoffee.com and use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order and give us a try. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. Until next time, I'll be leaving you in the dark where whispers linger and shadows dance. Stay wary, sleep well, and beware the whispers in the night. If you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. You can follow us anywhere on social media at Campfire Cult Pod and online at campfirecultpod.com. And finally, if you don't mind, please rate and review wherever possible.